Imagine being 19 and suddenly inheriting the first empire on which the sun never set. By 1519, Charles V held the crowns of Spain, the sprawling Americas, the wealthy Netherlands, the Austrian hereditary lands, and the vast Holy Roman Empire. Looking at this map of his European dominions, you can see how deeply fragmented his territory actually was. Through unexpected dynastic deaths and strategic royal marriages, Charles ended up with a scattered patchwork of Spanish, Austrian, and Burgundian domains. These were not unified states. They were disconnected realms, each with its own language, tax system, and deeply ingrained laws. Even worse, these isolated patches of land were surrounded by hostile neighbors, pinning Charles directly between the aggressive Kingdom of France and the expanding Ottoman Empire. Governing a territory of this scale presented an immediate logistical nightmare. There was no fixed capital. To enforce his authority, manage local parliaments, and coordinate military defenses, he had to physically travel. The physical toll of this arrangement was staggering. Charles executed 40 major journeys over the course of his rule. He spent nearly a quarter of his entire reign completely on the road, sleeping in temporary camps and enduring brutal weather conditions. His crown became a geographical trap. Instead of enjoying absolute power, Charles was condemned to a lifetime of endless travel and frantic crisis management. This intricate plate armor reflects the massive expense required to project power across those scattered borders. To fight his wars, Charles relied heavily on specialized, highly paid mercenary units, including fearsome German Landsknechte and the highly disciplined Spanish tercios. Simply coordinating these armies required moving information faster than his enemies. Charles expanded a sprawling, trans-European postal and espionage network, utilizing early permanent envoys and paid spies to relay military intelligence across the continent. Maintaining standing armies and intelligence networks across multiple countries drained the treasury. Charles racked up massive deficits, eventually borrowing 28 million ducats from wealthy German and Italian banking families just to keep his soldiers paid. To pay off these European bankers, he relied on an entirely different continent. Following the brutal conquests of the Aztec and Inca empires, Charles secured a staggering influx of stolen silver from the Americas. This illustration depicts a clash between Spanish soldiers and indigenous warriors in the Americas. Charles never visited the New World, yet the violent conquests taking place an ocean away served as the primary financial engine for his European wars. Attempting to govern these distant conquests triggered a severe moral crisis back in Spain. Reports of extreme abuses against indigenous populations led Charles to halt military expansions and convened a Valladolid debate, a formal royal inquiry aimed at establishing laws for human rights and colonization from thousands of miles away. The empire operated as a desperate, consuming machine. The vast wealth extracted from the Americas was immediately swallowed by his treasury, entirely spent on preventing his European borders from collapsing under crushing debt. Charles was fighting a constant war on 3 distinct fronts. First, he faced geographic encirclement by France. King Francis I relentlessly attacked Charles's holdings in northern Italy, sparking multiple exhausting conflicts over the Duchy of Milan. Second, the Ottoman Empire pressed in from the east. Under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, Ottoman forces conquered massive portions of Central Europe, while their Barbary pirate fleets devastated Habsburg trade routes in the Mediterranean. The third threat came from within his own borders. Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation spread rapidly through the German territories, challenging the Catholic foundation that Charles relied on to justify his rule. German princes weaponized this religious movement as a political tool to rebel against imperial authority. They formed armed alliances, shattering the religious unity of the Holy Roman Empire into hostile, fragmented territories. Look at this portrait of Charles in full armor. This was his reality. As crises cascaded across the continent, he personally rode out to fight fires on all 3 fronts, leading troops in Italy, defending Vienna from the Ottomans, and battling Protestant princes in Germany. He won major tactical victories, even capturing the French king at the Battle of Pavia. But the sheer cost of simultaneous, unending wars across multiple theaters crippled the global economy, causing rampant inflation across his territories. The sheer scale of these threats proved a harsh logistical reality. No single human being, regardless of their wealth or military strength, could successfully manage a three-front war spanning 2 continents. By the 1550s, the constant travel and stress had destroyed Charles's health. Severe, crippling gout left him unable to ride a horse, forcing the most powerful man in Europe to be carried between battlefields in a litter. The financial situation was equally terminal. Despite the endless flow of American silver, the empire's expenses had so far exceeded its income that the state was effectively bankrupt. In October 1555, a physically broken Charles gathered his government in Brussels. Leaning on an advisor for support, he cried as he delivered a public abdication speech, admitting to his subjects that his body and mind could no longer carry the weight of the crown. He then made a calculated geopolitical decision. Charles voluntarily split his global empire in 2. He transferred the Spanish crowns, the Netherlands, and the Americas to his son Philip, while handing the Austrian lands and the title of Holy Roman Emperor to his brother Ferdinand. Stripped of his titles, Charles retreated to the remote monastery of Yuste in rural Spain, living out his remaining days surrounded by clocks and paintings, far from the battlefields and politics of Europe. His abdication proved that the medieval dream of a single, universal Christian monarch was a logistical impossibility. A single ruler could not hold the globe together, giving way to a continent divided into distinct, competing nation-states.